welcome to Sid Cordell Christian People's Alliance. And we start with the same boring thing, Sid. We can't believe it gets worse, but it gets worse. We've had out 18 months of this shower, and we've just had a report from America, which is interesting. And it says everything. They cannot believe the shambles that is the United Kingdom from all aspects. I mean, we're being laughed at, Sid.
Yes, and I think the thing that annoys me most, as I've said before, is the dishonesty that surrounds the whole thing. I mean, the Daily Express said, 25 lies that Keir Starmer was told and went over them one by one. And it all started with, literally within hours of them getting elected, they told us that they'd discovered a 20 billion black hole in the nation's finances. And because of this 20 billion black hole, they got to make decisions which they hadn't wanted to make, but they're going to have to get rid of the winter fuel allowance. And they thought, everyone would say, oh, it's terrible, isn't it? They've discovered this. The Tories have left a 20 billion black hole. And now we've got to lose our winter fuel allowance because of what the Tories did. That's what they thought. But it didn't work like that. People thought, oh, we got this new government, and this new government are immediately getting rid of the winter fuel allowance. Terrible. And of course, then Keir Starmer, because of the outrage, then does a U-turn on it. But the point is, there wasn't a 20 billion black hole they didn't know about. I mean, the IFS said very clearly, anyone that cared to look could see that there wasn't money there, for instance, in order to pay off the doctors who were striking and the train drivers who were striking, etc., etc. And that was 9 billion of the 20 billion black hole, supposedly. Everything which they said they discovered was they were able to see before the election. So they were just being dishonest. And they produced a manifesto that said there'll be no more than 9 billion increase in taxes. Anything else, any other money we need will come out of existing budgets. And they had no intention of implementing what they promised. No intention. And it basically just got worse from there. I mean, they just carried on telling lies over and over again. And what we're having now is just a whole further set of dishonesty. And that's the reality of it.
It's shocking if you think about it. Sid, I can remember us talking at the beginning of this lot, saying how we're going to get through to 2029. And then somebody said, well, I don't think they'll last longer than 2027. It may well be 2026. But is Nigel or Polanski even ready for taking power?
Well, I think the likelihood is that Keir Starmer's going to go, and I think he'll go very soon. He'll probably go after the Labour Party lose the Gordon and Denton by-election, but if he doesn't go then, he'll certainly go after the local elections. The thing is now that the Labour backbenchers have had enough, frankly. And I've seen more than one Labour backbencher basically saying, no, sorry, we promised change. What we're having is not change. What we're having is more of the same or even worse. And people like Graham Stringer, a Labour backbencher, is basically saying Starmer's got to go. And when the Labour backbenchers are saying this openly now, I'm afraid he just can't last. I mean, he's trying to have a meeting today of all the Labour MPs, but there's going to be uproar. I mean, the other thing that's happened, by the way, was that he announced in the House of Commons that his cabinet secretary would do a review of all the documents in relation to the appointment of Peter Mandelson. And Kemi Badenoch stood up and said, I'm sorry, but a cabinet secretary is just your appointment. You're just trying to keep it in-house. What we should do is to have the House of Commons committee on security looking at it. And then you have Angela Rayner standing up in the House of Commons basically saying, I agree with Kemi Badenoch. This shouldn't just be left in-house. It should be it should be a committee of the House of Commons that looks at it. And Keir Starmer quietly backs down. Basically, he finds out that the majority of his backbenchers aren't going to support him, so he gives in, and we're now going to have a committee of the House of Commons look at the all the vetting material. But that's just an example of how totally weak he is now. He can't put things through the Labour MPs. But what's going to happen now, almost certainly, is that Keir Starmer will go, and another Labour MP will take his place. Now, Angela Rayner herself is trying to position herself, but she's not yet sorted out all the problems in relation to her stamp duty fiasco. That's not resolved yet.
It isn't, Sid, and let's be honest, there are four basic contenders
Hmm.
at the moment, and perhaps a few more on the side of the ring. You've mentioned Angela. I mean, this is a position that needs a certain amount of um, background, let's say. The girls come from Stockport, Manchester, and she left school with one GCSE. Now, putting it crudely, how's she going to behave when she meets the giants of this world, the Trumps of this world, any leader of anything in the European Union? I mean, surely she's going to be out of her depth, Sid.
Well, absolutely, because you see, Angela Rayner's whole quid pro quo, whatever you want to call it, is Tory scum. And she was very good at attacking the Tories and saying how terrible the Tories were. But when she was in opposition, you never heard, these are my policies, these are what I would do. What we should be doing is this, that, and the other. And I actually believe that a good, effective, responsible opposition is actually telling the nation what they would do if they were in power. And we haven't got that from Angela Rayner. So all we know is that she's not only criticised the Tories, and she's also being very critical now of Keir Starmer, and basically saying what he's doing is wrong. But I think she would be completely useless because within a very short space of time, people would say, well, she's no better than Starmer. They have got some people on the Labour benches that, look interesting. I mean, Hilary Benn, for instance, is one example of somebody that appears to have some gravitas and seems to be very clever. What you want is a politician who's clever, just irrespective of their policies. They've got to look at them and say, yeah, this guy's clever. He knows what he's talking about, or she knows what she's talking about. You definitely haven't got that with Angela
Well,
Rayner.
no, but we've got Peter Mandelson, who's very, very clever, haven't we? But before we go to him, let's go to Wes Streeting.
Mm,
Now, the cloud has appeared behind Wes big time
mm.
because the aforementioned gentleman with the black arts, Mandy, has been coaching him, led him through the early days of politics. Wow, that's got to be lived down big time, hasn't it?
Well, the thing about West Streeting is that he used to be employed by Stonewall. And he's openly homosexual. You can't just condemn him for being openly homosexual, but you can for being employed by Stonewall. And then you look at the things that he's been saying, and he's been saying things to Stonewall, and then he's been saying totally different things to a Christian meeting. And it's just like he's telling everyone that he supports them. So again, you've got somebody that's got no principle, I'm afraid. West Streeting or the principles that he has got are probably absolutely awful. And you see, the problem with Peter Mandelson is that, yeah, you're quite right. He is clever, but he's dedicated to the dark arts. I mean, really, he's double crossing people all the time, saying one thing to one person and one thing to somebody else. West Streeting is obviously doing that as well. So it's not surprising you find out he's coached by Peter Mandelson because he's not adopting a straight course. Now, you see, the thing about Donald Trump, whether you agree with him or you disagree with him, He's very clear. These are my policies. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to stop immigration. I'm going to get rid of all these people coming into the country that shouldn't be here. Yeah, I'm going to cut taxes because taxes are too high. I'm going to get rid of waste in government. I'm going to settle disputes all over the world, which people shouldn't be fighting each other. I want to stop people fighting each other. I'm going to build up the military, and I'm going to make us strong again. Everything that he says, he does. And you know exactly what he stands for and what he's going to do. He doesn't say one thing to one person and then something totally different to somebody else, and then just not do either. Which is what we get from most politicians, I'm afraid.
Andy Burnham may be allowed back in if Sir Keir decides to off-ski. And he is supposed to have been doing a good job in Manchester. But let's call him out on one thing. Don't tell me, Sid, that he didn't know about the grooming gangs in Manchester. He's done nothing. He's another one that has speaks with a forked tongue.
Yeah, I'm no fan of Andy Burnham. I mean, supposedly to the left of Keir Starmer, but at the end of the day, it was a silly decision of Keir Starmer's not to allow him to stand in the Gordon and Denton by-election because that's just created all the more bad feeling with 50 Labour backbenchers signing a motion to say that Andy Burnham should be allowed to stand. So that's 50 Labour backbenchers he's got that have now turned against him because of that decision. So it has not done Keir Starmer any favours. Much better to have let him stand and possibly lose the seat. And then Keir Starmer could have said, well, I didn't want him to stand in the first place. He wasn't the right candidate. If we'd have had the right candidate, we'd have won the seat. I mean, at least he'd have had some excuse. Now he's stopped Andy Burnham standing. He's got no excuse at all when Labour lose this by-election, which they almost certainly will.
Well, we've always got Mr. Miliband, haven't we, with his windmills? I
Well,
mean, is he serious? Does anybody want him?
Well, I think he's serious about wanting the job, but he was pretty much of a disaster when he was leader of the Labour Party last time. I mean, he was actually openly saying in 2010 that I've no idea what we should do. We're in a complete mess. Our debt has gone up to unacceptable levels. I mean, it was 140 billion per year, the deficit in 2010. And in real terms, that would be the equivalent of about 230 billion today, which is just totally unsustainable. But, they've tried lots of different policies. And he said, I don't know what to do. So, the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats came in and said, we've got to cut spending. They didn't cut spending correctly in the right places, but they did cut revenue spending and they got the economy back on track. I mean, but for somebody who's been Labour leader telling the world, I don't know what to do, I mean, oh yeah, let's have him back. Let's have him back again. He won't know what to do again next time, will he? You,
Well,
you, you did ask me earlier, by the way, which I didn't answer, whether I thought that Farage and Polanski were ready to take office. And the actual answer to that is that I think Farage is in a lot better place now. He's had the defections of people like Jenrick and Suella Braverman, because they've got experience in government. And he's gradually getting people into his team that have got some experience of being in power. And I think that is putting him in a much better position than he was in before those people joined him. I think it is possible for Farage to put together a government that can govern. I don't think Polanski could. I don't think Polanski is anywhere near taking power. I mean, he himself is not even in Parliament. And if he did get elected with a whole load of Green MPs, they'd all be completely new to Parliament. They've got no idea what they'd be doing. Polanski's nowhere near being ready to take power.
he's dangerous, though, because he could form a coalition.
Well, yes, I mean he might be there in the background. I mean, obviously Polanski's not going to be part of a reform or conservative government. He might join with the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party. But I think the mood of the nation, frankly, in the next election will be to get Labour out. And they don't want somebody to come in who's just going to keep Labour in power.
And thinking a bit more deeply, Sid, about all this, with the shenanigans that are going on at the moment, people are actually saying, is this an opportunity for the fall of the elite, our true rulers? And it looks as though that could happen.
Well, it'd be nice to think that we could actually return to honest government. You see, what's happened with this Epstein files is that an awful amount of dirt has been released, and it's quite interesting because Trump was under a lot of pressure to release these Epstein files a long time ago, and he declined to release them. But then I think it was when the Democrats were then started saying, we want to see the Epstein files, we want to see the Epstein files, and it's like, okay, well, if you really want to see them, if you're sure you want to see them, okay, we'll release them. So what we now find is that there's been enormous number of people in power, in key positions. I mean, not least people like Bill and Hillary Clinton, but there's a lot of people in senior positions in business as well that have all been involved and engaged in what is nothing other than corruption, frankly. I mean, it is utterly corrupt what Epstein's been doing. And it's not only the sex, it's also the finance, because he was a major financier. And we now find one of the things we found about Mandelson is that he was leaking to Epstein key financial information when he was in power, when he was effectively deputy prime minister, undermining what Gordon Brown was doing as the prime minister, leaking information to Epstein. So Epstein could then use that information to make millions on the stock market or on the bond market, because he released information in relation to what the government was going to do in relation to debt. So Epstein then makes millions on the bond market, pays Mandelson thousands for the information, and the whole thing is completely corrupt. But there's other people, because Epstein is making so much money, that are now saying, "Oh, I want this information too," and I'll pay you to give me the information. It's just
It's not only corrupt, it's completely bizarre. This was supposed to bring down the President of the United States, the Epstein fan. What's it done? It's brought down Sir Keir.
well, yes. I mean, of course, the media, because of who they are, wanted to pretend that the Epstein files was all about Trump, because we know that Trump was a friend of Epstein. But the problem is, for them, is that Trump ended his friendship with Epstein in 2004. And that was when Epstein was trying to pinch people from Mar-a-Lago, because he was actually a next door neighbor of Trump. So he was going to Mar-a-Lago and he was talking to the girls at Mar-a-Lago, come and work for me and I'll give you more money. I'll increase your wage. Which, of course, Trump was furious. Well, you're taking my employees, are you, and offering them more money? It's just like, I'm not having that. You're banned. You're not coming here anymore. And that was the end of the friendship. That was 2004. It was 2008 that Epstein was actually convicted of having sex with underage girls and encouraging this sex trafficking operation. And Peter Mandelson was involved with him not only in 2008, but also after he was sent to prison. He's actually staying at his place. So Trump's involvement had ended long before this scandal that Mandelson was involved in. So all of a sudden, I'm sorry, when the files are released, it's not about Trump at all. And Trump has never engaged in any of this terrible sexual activity that was going on. He's never taken advantage of any of the financial gains that Epstein was making. Trump is basically completely clean when the files are released. So all of a sudden, yeah, it's about other people.
Yes, indeed. And apparently now The ring is surrounding the present king and mum, even for having a favourite in Andrew. And people are saying they've got to have known, even decades ago, what they got. It's not a loose cannon they had. This was somebody that was doing the country down, leaking confidential documents. The royal family must have known. Therefore, shouldn't we have an apology from the king?
Well, the answer to that is I don't know really. I mean, I don't blame the Queen, frankly. I mean, Andrew's her son, and I'm afraid when somebody's your son, you tend to always want to think the best of them and think that they're a lovely person and a nice person and doing good. I mean, I know with my children, I love my children. I always think the best of them. If I was then proven to me that one of my children had been involved in some totally corrupt activity, I mean, that wouldn't stop me loving them because I still love them because they're my children. So I don't, frankly, I don't blame the Queen at all. And I'm sure the Queen wasn't involved in anything. As far as Prince Charles is concerned, or sorry, as King Charles is concerned, um, he has really, from the word go, distanced himself from Andrew. He's not involved Andrew in royal operations since he's been king. So I don't think, frankly, that Charles is responsible.
Well, apologies are not what they used to be, as we note from the recent apology of Sir Keir. I've never known such, through gritted teeth, if you will, an apology which was really blaming everybody else except him. The saga carries on, doesn't it?
Yes, well, if we now come to Sakir, what we're talking about here is a barrister who is trained to question people and find out the truth in court and expose the truth in court. That's basically his job. Now, what happened last Wednesday at Prime Minister's Questions was that Kemi Badenoch asked him 3 times, did you know what was going on between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson before you appointed him? Now, for the first 2 questions, Keir Starmer just avoided the question. Yes, we're not happy with what's gone on. We're now going to set up a full inquiry, and we're going to, so on and so forth. And this is what we're going to do, and just avoided the question. The third time, she said, right, I've asked you twice. I'm going to ask you again. The question is, did you know about the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Peter Mandelson before you appointed him? And he came back and said, yes, I did know. And we then asked a whole series of questions to find out the detail of what had gone on. That was shocking. And Kemi Badenoch then came back and said, this is shocking that you have told us that you knew. And that was what really infuriated the Labour backbenchers, because Keir Starmer suddenly is holding up his hands and saying, I knew. Now, because he knew, that also basically gives the lie to everything else that he'd been saying, which was that Peter Mandelson told me that he hardly knew Jeffrey Epstein and I was fooled by his lies. That was his position. But all of a sudden, it's like, well, he knew of the relationship with Jeffrey Epstein before he was appointed, and he went back and asked a load more questions. That's what he himself said in the House of Commons. So this idea he was fooled was obviously completely untrue. So Keir Starmer now has basically admitted that he's been lying all along when he said that he was fooled by Peter Mandelson. And that is what has really infuriated the Labour MPs, and should infuriate, frankly, everybody that hears what he said.
Labour have got a think tank moving slightly to the right of the problem. And it's about the shires, about our country, our villages. And apparently, the think tank, and no doubt it will be approved by the elites, they want it more diverse. There's too many white people in there. And the average small village has a church, has, if it's lucky, a small post office, and maybe a social centre, and not a lot else. Don't forget the pub. And the Asian part of the community wants to move in, apparently, under their terms. And it's a good thing that we integrate. Really? They don't like dogs, Sid. It's not within, especially from Pakistan. I must admit, when we first came to Spain centuries ago, dogs were never allowed in the house. They were guard dogs just put in the garden. That has changed significantly. But this is, again, a matter of culture and rearranging the famous deck chairs so that we can all live together happily. But this is, again, socialism that doesn't work.
Frankly, I'm becoming increasingly infuriated by the behavior of Muslims or Muslim leaders in this nation and in nations across the world. Now, if you don't mind me just going into the background for a moment, we've just had a speech from Zohran Mamdani, the new mayor of New York, where he said in this speech that Muhammad's Hajj is an example which all Muslims should be willing to follow. They should be willing to travel in order to advance Islam. And all that's happening with the immigrants at the moment is that they are Muslims traveling to advance Islam. So he's basically given the game away. So all these people that are coming over here in small boats, etc., aren't fleeing anything. They're part of a Muslim Hajj to make the West more Islamic, which is a conclusion I come to anyway. But this week we've had Zohran Mamdani's just confirmed it. So they're here to make Britain more Islamic. And that's quite interesting. I had a discussion with somebody on YouTube, I think it was, or X, and I actually said to them that I was concerned that Reform are actually putting up a Muslim candidate to take on Sadiq Khan to be the new mayor of London. And he basically said to me, well, this is like picking strawberries in a strawberry field. He said, basically, London is a Muslim city. And I said to him, hold on a minute. The actual percentage of Muslims in London from the last census was 15%. And the highest in any borough was Tower Hamlets, where it's 40%, which basically means that even in Tower Hamlets, there's 60% that aren't Muslim. But even if you say it's increased from 50%, we've got at least 80% of people in London that aren't Muslims. Now, the thing is, Islam is very good at promoting themselves and promoting their religion and demanding favours. I mean, we've even got a situation now where they're demanding his new Islamophobia law, which is complete nonsense, but that's what's going on at the moment. And frankly, Christians need to wake up. We need to wake up. See, that's why we've got the Christian People's Alliance, frankly, because this is encouraging Christians to be a little bit more political and to stand together. And if we did stand together, even if we weren't elected as a Christian People's Alliance, if Christians stood together, when we had a block vote, we could then say, well, we're going to get behind this party, we're going to get that behind that party if they do what we want, which is basically what the Muslims do. So Christians have got to be more political. And this idea, frankly, that if you don't support an Islamophobia law and if you don't allow Muslims to run everything, then you're racist. I mean, it's just is frankly utter nonsense.
I'm going to talk about Claude. That's the latest new kid on the block. AI. There's lots of AIs. and some of them are very good. Some depend on where they get the information from. Usually the free ones, and they are a little bit swinging left or right, whichever they are. But Claude is fantastic, apparently. So fantastic, it's going to do away with a lot of financial service jobs. You won't need a financial advisor, Sid. We've both been down that route in our time because you can get Claude to tell you what to invest in and what the history of this stock and share is, etc. It's all going to get also going to get rid of a lot of lawyers. I'm listening to the cheers now as I say that, because it can do away with the humdrum existence, which is in every job at times. They better watch their tails. And the value in all this is a falling. Bitcoin, if you've noticed, has lost half its value in a week. $200 billion. Now, it's always been a gamble. And we've said this many times, if you've got a lot of money, very few people have, but still don't put more than 5% in a Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah.
And everything is linked, everything is changing. The Bitcoin debacle is suffering the vagaries of Donald Trump with his tariffs, etc. Sid, have you got an easy definition of what Bitcoin is all about?
Well, you're absolutely right. Cryptocurrencies have always been high risk. And see, the thing is, currencies are backed by central banks, which then have an enormous amount of money to back them up if there's a run on the currency. Bitcoin doesn't have that, so there's nothing to back up Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin starts to go down, some central bank can come in and start buying Bitcoins to retain stability. So it's going to be much more volatile for that reason. And and obviously anyone that's involved in financial advice would say exactly what you've said, that put no more than 5% of your money into Bitcoin because it's high risk. And just in general, by the way, what you were saying about AI taking over financial advice. See, the key aspect of financial advice is not to be able to tell somebody what's happened in the past, because it's very easy to analyze what's happened in the past and basically say that, oh, this particular fund has performed best in the past. What the art of financial advice is to be able to project what's going to happen in the future. And the fund that today might be right at the bottom might be the fund that is going to pick up and perform extremely well over the next 4 to 5 years. And the fund that today is at the top might be the one that's going to start going down. So you've got to be careful. You've got to look at, what's going to happen, what's likely to happen. I mean, for instance, when it comes to bonds always perform best when interest rates are going down. So if interest rates are now likely to go down, as they have been for a little while, then it's a good time to invest in bonds because the capital value of the bonds will go up. If interest rates are going up, then you shouldn't be investing in bonds because the capital value of those bonds will go down. So, that's just one example. But, as a financial advisor, I think there will always be a place for financial advice. But I think what may well happen in future is that AI will be a tool which financial advisors can use to help them to analyze and make projections. And when it comes to courts, I think it's quite likely that judges may well be able to use AI to analyze a lot of information which they've got in front of them, because obviously judges are expected to grasp a lot of information quickly, and that's the art of being a good barrister, and it's the good barristers that become judges. So they've got to be able to analyze a lot of information very quickly. Well, if you've got an AI tool that can help you to analyze the information, then that will be very useful. I don't think it will remove the requirement for judges or remove the requirement for barristers. but I think it will be a tremendous aid to them, and may well mean that they need fewer backroom staff than they've got at the moment. That may well be the case.
The key, of course, one must mention of financial advice is to know the client and each
Yeah.
individual circumstance. And there's nothing better than a face-to-face analysis before giving that advice.
And that's true. I mean, knowing attitude to risk, absolutely. I mean, because, yeah, I mean, risk is very, very important for giving financial advice. And if someone says, no, I don't want to take any risk, then you're not going to put them in any um, market. But if they say, well, I'm happy to take a small risk, but I don't want to take a big risk. But yeah, you need to know their full situation to be able to give them proper advice. Absolutely.
There are good financial advisors and there are not so good financial advisors. A lot of people have come across the second characteristic of financial advice. And they've been driven eventually to say, oh, let's have a fund of funds. Let's have one in America, let's have one in Europe, etc. And it's worked out for them. So they're not paying for financial advice, yet the spread is so great that overall it's much better than putting your money in a bank.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've always been very much in favour of fund managers because a fund manager, can know what's going on, in a way that you or I just can't know if you're just investing in individual stocks. And like you say, fund of funds, you're then basically investing in fund managers who are managing fund managers. So your spread is much greater. So absolutely, that's a good idea for investment. Yeah. I used to like Fidelity's Wealth Builder, which was Fidelity's fund of funds. So you're investing in a broad spread of Fidelity's funds, and they're one of the biggest fund managers in the world. So the risk then becomes much lower.
Takes you back. There you go. We'll stick with the finance world a bit longer and we'll talk about Andrew Bailey now. He's always seemed to be a bit lefty. He's the big cheese behind the Bank of England, a bit wokey, a bit wetty. And yet, this very week, he said, I don't want to sound pious, but where are we as a society? What sort of place are we living in? Referring, of course, to the lies that we were talking about earlier on in the piece, the state of our economy, the state of our government. He's got the thing eventually, some people might say, but it doesn't give one a lot of confidence if the head of the Bank of England is saying this.
Yes, well, yes. I mean, but earlier you were talking about the establishment and what's being exposed in the establishment. And you see, one of the things that's very frustrating for someone like me is, I believe in honesty, I believe in truth. And, I think if you are honest and you are truthful, it brings respect. And I find it frustrating that sometimes people who have been very dishonest and totally corrupt have got themselves into key positions despite their dishonesty and corruption. And Peter Mandelson is one example of that, who's been in a lot of key positions in government, business secretary and effectively deputy prime minister and goodness knows what else, in government, despite being completely corrupt, as well as being the EU trade commissioner. And you'd like to think that people like that would never get anywhere near government because people would say, well, this man's corrupt. So, there's no way we can allow him to have a key post in government. But it's not what happens. And when you look back in retrospect, you say, well, he should never have been appointed. But there's somebody else who should have been appointed, who wasn't corrupt, who never had that position because Peter Mandelson had that position. And you could say the same about Governor of Bank of England. You could say currently about the General Secretary of the United Nations. I mean, the current General Secretary of the United Nations, I think, is absolutely terrible. He's actually been using the United Nations to promote Islamic extremism. I mean, supporting Hamas in Gaza and goodness knows what else. You think that man should never have got anywhere near being the General Secretary of the United Nations. But somebody else who should have been the General Secretary of the United Nations never got the job because he was promoted wrongly in put in that place. And, that is what frustrates me, frankly, very much frustrates me.
And the same thing about the World Health Organization. Exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, the people running that, basically gave us completely false information during COVID-19. So, yeah, I mean, there's somebody else who should have been in charge of the World Health Organization who's not there because the wrong people are in charge. Yeah.
Which leads us to China, Sid. And we're cozying up to China like Canada is. There are the two most woke countries in the world, GB and Canada. And we're going over there on mission saying how important China is for each country. And we're turning a blind eye to the persecution of Christians, persecution of Uyghurs, Muslims, persecution of Tibet, Buddhists, and all this includes killings, persecution of Falun Gong. Now, that's a new religion, which is a peaceful religion to China. And now, further good news comes out. I'm being sarcastic because the organ harvesting that is done quite freely in China, they're particularly taking organs out of Falun Gong, their own religion, if you wish. And it's appalling. And there we are. We look as a comparison, this is, of the building of the House of Commons, Westminster in general. You've almost got to have a hard hat to walk through the corridors there because masonry is falling off. It's got to be rebuilt practically. There's two options according to the powers that be that MP's going to vote on. One is roughly a 60-year option, 60 years. The other is about half that time. The 60-year option will cost twice as many billions as the 30-year option. And some wags come along and said, why does it take, and here's the link, China 2 years to build a whole railway, including stations and everything, and it takes us 60 years to repair Westminster. And Elizabeth Oakeshott has highlighted this in many good tweets, and I've responded to one of them because what is the answer? Do we move Parliament to Milton Keynes? Well, with a number of U-turns and roundabouts, that sounds just about right. Or do we go along with this madness of spending billions? And how can the Chinese, because they would, build the thing in 2 years for a quarter of the price? Well, I did point out to Ms. Oakeshott that the solution is very simple. You just move Parliament along the river a bit to the new Chinese embassy, and that is a win-win situation. It gets rid of the Chinese problem and gives us somewhere to go.
Okay, well, obviously, what you're saying there is a little bit tongue in cheek, but if we come back to the main issue, you see, Keir Starmer's just been over to China and shaken hands with President Xi and come back with a new trade deal. The problem is there's no increase in British exports to China, but China has got permission to export Chinese cars to the UK in a way that they never could before. That's the result of the trade deal. They're now saying that this new trade deal with China is probably going to destroy the British car market and and basically all the factories, the car factories at the moment in the UK are probably going to be undermined, and many of them will have to close because of the flood of Chinese cars that are going to come into the UK. Now, that is just mad, absolutely mad, and just shows that Keir Starmer's got no idea of how to deal with China. You don't deal with China by shaking hands and saying, oh yeah, well, let's just be friends. Let's just do whatever you want. And if you do what we want, we'll do what you want. You don't, that's not how you deal with China. You deal with China by being absolutely brutal. And you see, Trump knows what to do. He's just imposing tariffs left, right, and centre on Chinese goods in order to so that American goods can effectively compete with China. And that's the right approach. Keir Starmer should have gone to China if he was going to go to China and basically say, I'm sorry, but you're flooding our market. There's going to be new tariffs on Chinese steel. There's going to be new tariffs on Chinese cars. And, we export very little to you. So, because we export very little to you, if you reciprocate, it's not going to have much effect. But if you're willing to open your market to British goods, increasingly, then we can reduce the tariffs, per se. And that's basically what Trump is doing. Keir Starmer got nowhere near that approach. He's just basically saying to China, do whatever you want. And it's the same with the Chinese embassy that you've just referred to. He's just basically saying, well, if you want to build a new embassy, build a new embassy wherever you want. Do whatever you want in the UK. That's Starmer's position. And it's disastrous, totally disastrous.
The other thing that's disastrous is the sale of EVs at the moment. This is an artificial market constructed deliberately by the loony left to get to net zero nonsense. And if you're manufacturing a car, it can take 10, even 15 years from start to finish. The car makers just don't know where they are, Sid. There's these big benefits, £4,000 or £5,000 if you buy an EV, a pure electrical vehicle. And then the next year they take it off and you're back to square one. Margaret Thatcher, the markets rule. And she was right.
Yeah, well, one of the things she said is you can't buck the market. Yeah. Yes, one of this going to happen with this new China deal is China's going to flood the British market with all their electric vehicles. So it's going to destroy all electric vehicle production within the UK. I mean, that's what's going to happen, unfortunately. But the other side of the coin is the fact that increasingly people aren't going to switch to electric vehicles because a lot of people who've bought electric vehicles aren't happy with them because you actually find that the amount of time that you have to spend with your vehicle on charge makes it, very difficult. I mean, there's a cost involved in sitting waiting for your car to charge. I think it's an electric vehicle as a second car is not a bad idea because you can just have a second car that's on charge and you can just use to run rounds, do the shopping and so on and so forth. But you've still got your main car that you're going to use for long journeys. But to have an electric vehicle as your main car just doesn't work. And that's the reality of it. And people are finding that out.
Yeah, a lot of people agree with that. They buy a milk float for local use and stick to conventional car units for long distance. We've got to finish. We've run out of time, Sid, again, all too early. Two good items here, good news items. Again, hidden away on page 9, right column. Nuclear ships are going to change the world for the good. It's going to be about 10 years before we get there. But of course, you can transfer monstrous amounts of imports and exports by boat, much better than planes. They're a bit slow. So what's the remedy? Well, go nuclear. The boats move twice as fast. Makes a big difference. And UK are at, a leading position in this because we are very good at small nuclear engines. Now, the bad news in all this is it costs £500 million to get one of these monsters at sea, Whereas if you get a diesel engine boat, and they're a bit mucky, although they can have scrubbers fitted, but they come cheap, only 150 million. But if you work out the economics, twice the speed, no need to bunker for a long time. In other words, fill up with diesel or whatever the fuel may be, then the saving is absolutely substantial. And we're at the leading edge of development of this, not in building. You still have to go to the Far East to get value for money in building one of these mega ships, but then they're floated to UK and fitted with the engine. 10 years off, but that's a bright thing to look forward to, Sid.
Well, yes, and we need to develop that and continue to develop it and make sure that we remain at the forefront, because something today that's costing 500 billion with new technology, a few years down the line, they'll probably reduce the cost to about 250 billion. And if it's far more efficient and effective than a diesel powered boat, then over time they'll just completely take over. So absolutely, it's great. We're actually the forefront of something and developing it. I mean, Britain has been traditionally very good at developing new ideas and new products, but we've been very poor at actually getting those new products onto the market effectively.
Yeah, we're good at giving things away, Sid.
Yeah, we just tend to, somebody else picks up our idea and develops it, but that's got to change. Absolutely has to change. It's not going to change under socialism, but it can change if we have the right government support to new ideas.
Right, I want your advice. We're going to have soccer, of course, as we go out, as we usually do. Well, not only soccer, but mainly soccer. What's happened to Manchester United? What miracle has happened, Sid?
Well, one of the things that we were saying before, if you remember, for Manchester United, was that Amorim was basically saying, I don't like my players. And we're actually saying if a manager loses the dressing room, then that's very, very dangerous, and is going to cause a lot of problems for the club. Um, so basically, what's happened is Michael Carrick's come in with a different approach, and all the players he's are basically rallying around him and basically saying, "Yeah, we like this new approach. This guy is very much on our side. He's one of us. I mean, he knows the Old Trafford." Situation from when he was a player there, and he's worked under one of the best managers in the world that's ever we've ever had, in Alex Ferguson, and he's taking some of those ideas forward. I mean, he's had experience of running other clubs, so he's not totally inexperienced. They've only brought him in on a short-term contract, to give him a chance to see what he's like, so they're not paying him anything like as much as they were paying Amorim. But the players are rallied round. It was incredible, frankly, how Man United beat both Arsenal and Manchester City in his first two games. I mean, they were the top two teams in the country that Man United beat. And it's gone on from there. He's won another two games, and well done to him. Well done to him. I think well done, Michael Carrick. It's whether he's the right manager long term, I don't know, but he's certainly got the dressing room on his side, and that's what's made a massive difference.
Well, he's allowed players to play in their best position.
Yeah.
What concerns me is Amarin's been there for well over 12 months. Why did the management structure put up with him from, well, Sid, we do this show every week. Day one, I said, what is this? I'm sticking to this system, whatever happens. You can't do that in whatever form of life you are in. You've got to adapt and go with the flow and change your mind, admit you're wrong, admit you're right, even. But no, I don't care whether the Pope says this, I'm going to do it my way. No, I wouldn't put up with that in management of a company.
Well, yes, but the key thing, as I said before, he didn't get the players to take on board his ideas. See, if all the players had basically said, "Yeah, we agree with you. These are the great ideas. We're with you. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to implement," then he could have probably been successful. But if he's got half the players saying, "What's this system? This system's rubbish. I can't play in this system." If he's got half the players saying that, then it's going to be a disaster for the club, isn't it?
Yeah, they were right, mind you. Having said that, the other thing that's coming out this week is, well, the trumpet's always been blown about we're the best league in the world. Now, in the past, I questioned that, but I don't question it any longer. When you look at the results in the European football leagues, the main one, of course, the Champions League, five of the eight teams that are there in the last stages now are English, British teams. My goodness me. Um, there's two reasons. We've got the best players because we can offer the best wages. And also, we play a particularly aggressive, physical type of football. And that has changed the recruitment of footballers from abroad.
Mm.
And a lot more now are failing because they cannot adapt to the British system of aggressive physical football. This is why often the players from abroad, mainly at the moment Africa, can be got on the cheap until they step foot into the British League. And then, oh dear, what have we paid £30 million for when we could have paid 60 million, got something from a competitor within the Football League? Because these players from abroad do adapt and they are worth the money, but they've got to have 2 or 3 years under their belt to do that. So a bit more wisdom is being exercised, is it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Modern football, you have to be very fit and you have to be willing to run around like crazy for 90 minutes because modern football is the press. So the forwards are expected to press the defences and try and win the ball off them while it's in the opponent's half. And then if they're not successful, then they've got to run back very fast in order to defend. Um, but it's interesting. I mean, I think it's quite exciting football to watch. Yeah, but I think at the moment we've got, exciting football in the UK, like you say, because we're able to buy the best players. We got five of the top eight now in Europe. I mean, it seems almost incredible that Tottenham are 14th in the Premier League, but finished the Champions League in fourth place. So it's like they're fourth in Europe, but 14th in the UK. It's just like, wow. Something would have seemed to have gone wrong. Arsenal, by contrast, are first in the Premier League and first in the Champions League, which is interesting. But yeah, I mean, our teams have done very well in Europe. It is, partly because they have to be very fit. The other thing which I think has also happened is that I looked at some European teams, especially Italian teams, and they seem to be very good at falling over for nothing. And even though you don't like it, I think this whole new VAR system has made it much harder for players to cheat. So if you can't just fall over for no reason and get a free kick, you can actually be sent off for falling over for no reason. Um, it makes it, and I think the British teams are much wiser to this now as well. So I think that has taken away the advantage which some of the European teams had over British teams in the past. And if it's just purely a matter of skill and fitness, because the British teams have got more money, they are going to come to the top, and that's what's happening.
Perhaps we should have VAR in 10 Downing Street. I'd change my opinion there. Yes. Lastly, Sid,
Has the Prime
cricket.
Minister cheated? Let's go to VAR.
Yes. Oh dear, the mind. Yes, it boggles. Sid, um, finally, we've got to go to cricket, and we have got an emergency. It's gone bats, literally. It now costs to get a professional bat £1,000. There's not the willow available. Now, willow is a very strange animal, tree, because it can withstand a lot of shocks, which you get, of course, with 90-mile-an-hour balls hitting the face of the bat, and they eventually shatter. And it's been agreed this last week that you can have layered bats. Maybe not for test matches quite yet, but in county cricket at various levels, yes. Now, these are composite bats, in other words, less costly wood, um, further back at the bat, and maybe a willow facing to the bat. So it's all part of sustainability, isn't it?
Well, it shouldn't be that problem to grow, well, to get willow. It's not like yew, for instance. I mean, yew trees do take many years to grow, and yews were always used for bows and arrows, and because they're so, such a strong wood and very pliable. So that's why you have yew trees in churchyards, because they used to use them for the bows and arrows. But willow trees grow a lot quicker than yew trees, so it shouldn't be a massive problem. But I guess, they're always going to try something different. There's nothing problem with trying something different.
Well, yeah, rubber's the answer, really, isn't it? And the ball will fly over the boundaries quite easily. Okay, Sid, we've covered various subjects as we always do. Exciting week. Will we still have a Labour government at the end of it, or will it indeed go full time? Very little chance of that at the moment. Or do we have to wait for the local elections?
No, I think we'll still have a Labour government, but I don't think we'll have Keir Starmer in power very much longer. It's over for Keir Starmer, I'm afraid.
There you go. I don't think you really are afraid, but I mean, let's put that in quotes. Well, we'll see you next week.
Thank you.